Hey guys, tonight you're going to experience what it was really like to be Albert Einstein, not as the genius from textbooks, but through his own eyes, feeling what he felt. Most people imagine Einstein's life as pure brilliance, revolutionary discoveries, worldwide fame, and a mind that changed how we understand the universe. But the reality is, being Einstein meant spending your childhood convinced you were broken, watching your family business collapse while you couldn't help, failing to get a teaching job despite your degree, and working in obscurity while raising a child you'd eventually abandon. We're talking about 2 failed marriages, children who grew to resent you, watching your life's work used to create the most destructive weapon in history, and spending your final decades as an exile being watched by government agents who thought you might be a spy. So tonight, we're going to walk through his life from the moment he was born into a world that wasn't ready for how his mind worked, to the impossible choices he made just to survive in a century that tried to destroy everything he loved. Now, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let's step into Germany in 1879. It's March 14th, 1879, and you've just been born in Ulm, Germany. Your parents are Hermann and Pauline Einstein. They're Jewish, but not particularly religious. Your father runs an electrical equipment business with your uncle. Your mother loves music and wants you to play violin. The first thing everyone notices is your head. It's unusually large, misshapen. Your grandmother takes one look at you and says you're too fat, too heavy, deformed. Nice welcome to the world, right? Your parents worry something is wrong with you. Maybe they're right to worry because you don't start talking. Most babies say their first words around 1 year old. You don't. 1 year passes, then 2 years, then 3. You're silent. Your parents take you to doctors. They wonder if you're deaf, if something is broken in your brain. Your family calls you the dopette, the dopey one. They think you might be mentally disabled. When you finally do start talking, around age 4 or 5, you don't speak normally. You whisper sentences to yourself first, practicing them under your breath, moving your lips silently. Then, only when you're sure the sentence is right, you say it out loud. This goes on for years. Other children think you're weird. Adults think you're slow. You're not slow. Your brain just works differently. While other kids are playing and chattering, you're thinking deeply about each word, each idea. You're processing everything more carefully. But nobody understands this. They just see a strange, quiet child who can't keep up. Your father gives you a compass when you're 5 years old. You stare at it for hours. The needle always points north. No matter how you turn the compass, something invisible is controlling it. A force you can't see. This fascinates you and terrifies you at the same time. What else is out there that you can't see? What invisible rules control everything? You start school, and it's terrible. The German school system in the 1880s is rigid, militaristic, and focused on memorization. Teachers lecture. Students sit in rows and repeat facts. You're supposed to memorize dates, names, formulas, and spit them back without question. If you ask why, you get punished. If you challenge the teacher, you get hit. You hate this. Your mind doesn't work by memorization. You need to understand why things work, how they connect. When a teacher tells you to memorize something, you ask why it's true. This makes teachers furious. They think you're being disrespectful. They call you disruptive, stubborn, a problem student. One teacher tells you that you'll never amount to anything. Another says you're poisoning the other students with your questions. You're not trying to cause trouble, you just can't accept information without understanding it. But in this system, that makes you a failure. The only subject you like is mathematics. Math makes sense. It has rules that connect to each other logically. 2 + 2 = 4 because it has to, not because a teacher says so. You can work through problems step by step and arrive at truth. Math doesn't lie. Math doesn't punish you for asking questions. Your mother forces you to take violin lessons. At first, you hate it. It's just another thing you're bad at, another thing making you feel broken. But then, around age 13, you discover Mozart. Suddenly, music isn't just notes on a page, it's patterns, mathematical relationships, beauty. You start to love the violin. It becomes one of the few ways you can express feelings you don't have words for. When you're 10, your family moves to Munich. Your father's business is struggling, competition is fierce, and the Einstein brothers are always one bad contract away from bankruptcy. You watch your father stress about money constantly. He works long hours, tries to win contracts, but success never quite comes. Your family isn't poor, but you're never comfortable either. Your parents invite a poor Jewish medical student named Max Talmud to dinner every week. It's a Jewish tradition to help students. Max becomes your friend, the first person who doesn't treat you like you're stupid. He brings you science books, math books, philosophy books. You devour them. By age 12, you're teaching yourself geometry and calculus. Max brings you Kant's philosophy, and suddenly you're grappling with questions about reality, knowledge, and truth. This is when you realise something important. The world everyone else sees isn't necessarily the real world. People accept what they're told. They trust their senses, but their senses lie. The compass proved that. There are invisible forces everywhere. So how do you find truth? Not by memorising what teachers say, but by questioning everything, testing everything, thinking deeply about everything. You become obsessed with light. Light is strange. It travels in straight lines, but it also bends. It acts like a wave, but also like a particle. You wonder, what would it be like to ride on a beam of light? If you could travel at the speed of a light, what would you see? These aren't normal questions for a 12-year-old, but your brain doesn't work normally. At 15, your life falls apart. Your father's business fails completely. The family has to move to Italy to start over. But you can't go with them. You have to stay in Munich to finish school. German law requires it. So your parents leave you behind, alone, boarding with strangers, attending a school you hate, in a city where you have no family. You're 15 years old, abandoned. You wake up every day in a house that isn't yours, go to a school where teachers despise you, and know your family's in another country struggling to survive. You're completely alone. And you're expected to just push through, get your diploma, and somehow make something of yourself. You can't do it. After 6 months, you have a breakdown. You get a doctor to write notes saying you're suffering from nervous exhaustion. Then you drop out of school and show up in Italy, surprising your parents. You tell them you couldn't take it anymore. They're disappointed, but also relieved to see you. Your father's new business isn't doing well. The family needs you, even if they're not sure what you're good for. You spend a year in Italy, happy for the first time in your life. The Italian education system is less rigid. The culture is warmer. You can breathe. You hike in the mountains, think about physics, and write your first scientific paper about magnetism and ether. You're 16 years old, and you're already trying to understand the fundamental nature of the universe. But you can't stay in paradise forever. You need a diploma. You need a future. Your father wants you to become an electrical engineer, get a stable job, help support the family. So you apply to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich. It's one of the best technical schools in Europe. If you can get in, your future is set. You take the entrance exam, and you fail. Not completely, but you fail the sections on languages, botany and zoology. Your math and physics scores are excellent, but it's not enough. You're 17 years old, a dropout with no diploma, and now a failed entrance exam. You're exactly what that teacher predicted. Someone who'll never amount to anything. The school makes you an offer. If you finish your diploma at a Swiss secondary school, they'll admit you next year. So you enroll in a school in Aarau, Switzerland. This school is different. Teachers encourage questions. Classes are discussions, not lectures. For the first time in your life, school doesn't feel like prison. You live with the family of one of your teachers, Jos Winterler. They treat you like a son. You fall in love with their daughter, Marie. She's your first love, and for a while, life is good. You're learning, you're loved, and you can see a path forward. In 1896, you finally get your diploma and enter the Polytechnic. You're studying to become a teacher of physics and mathematics. You're finally where you belong, surrounded by people who care about science. But even here, you don't quite fit. You skip lectures you find boring. You teach yourself from books instead. You argue with professors when you think they're wrong. One professor, Heinrich Weber, is a brilliant physicist, but he only teaches classical physics. He ignores the new discoveries happening in the field. You want to learn about Maxwell's equations, about electromagnetic waves, about the cutting edge. Weber thinks you're arrogant for questioning his curriculum. You fall in love again, this time with the only woman in your physics program, Mileva Maric. She's Serbian, brilliant, and as passionate about physics as you are. She's also 4 years older, from a different culture, walks with a limp from a childhood illness, and is exactly the kind of woman your mother will hate. And your mother does hate her. Pauline Einstein thinks Mileva is too old, too foreign, too intellectual, not pretty enough, not Jewish. She makes her disapproval clear. This creates a rift between you and your family that never fully heals. But you don't care. Mileva understands you. She's the only person who can keep up with your ideas. You study together, discuss physics, dream of solving the universe's mysteries together. In 1900, you graduate. You're 21 years old with a degree in physics. You should be able to get a teaching position easily, but you can't. You apply to universities all over Europe. Every application is rejected. Your professors don't recommend you. Weber actively blocks you, still angry about your attitude in his classes. Other professors remember you as the student who skipped lectures and challenged authority. You're stuck. You have a degree, but no job. Your father's business has failed again. The family has no money to support you. You take temporary tutoring jobs, teaching spoiled rich kids who don't care about physics. You're 22, then 23, living hand to mouth, watching classmates get positions while you're rejected everywhere. Mileva is in the same situation, but worse. She failed her final exams twice. The pressure of being the only woman in the program, dealing with professors who don't believe women can do physics, and managing a difficult relationship with you all broke her. She doesn't get her degree. Her dream of being a physicist is dead. And then she gets pregnant. It's 1901. You're not married. She's not Swiss. If people find out, both your reputations are destroyed. She goes back to Serbia to hide the pregnancy. You stay in Switzerland, desperately searching for a job. Any job. In 1902, Mileva gives birth to a daughter. You name her Liesel. You never meet her. You can't travel to Serbia. You can't acknowledge her existence. No one can know about this child. You and Mileva exchange letters about her, but they're coded. Careful. You suggest giving her up for adoption. Mileva resists, but eventually agrees. Liesel disappears from history. Either she's adopted or she dies of scarlet fever as an infant. You never speak of her again. Think about that. Your first child, a daughter, and you never hold her. You never see her face. You make the decision to give her away because acknowledging her would destroy your career prospects. You're 23 years old, and you're already making choices that will haunt you forever. Finally, in 1902, you get a job. Not as a professor or researcher, but as a technical expert. Third class at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. You evaluate patent applications for electrical devices and machinery. It's boring, mundane work. You're supposed to spend 8 hours a day reading applications and writing reports. But the job saves you. It pays enough to survive. It's stable. And secretly it gives you time to think. Patent applications only take you a few hours to process. The rest of the time, you're supposed to look busy. Instead, you hide papers in your desk and work on physics. You're thinking about light, about time, about space, about motion. The patent office becomes your private laboratory for thought experiments. In 1903, you and Mileva finally get married. Your mother is furious, refuses to attend. Your father gives a deathbed blessing, reluctantly, just before he dies. You're starting your marriage under a cloud of family disapproval and the secret of a daughter you abandoned. In 1904, Mileva gives birth to a son, Hans Albert. Now you're a father officially, raising a child while working at the patent office and trying to revolutionize physics in your spare time. Mileva wanted to be a physicist. Now she's a housewife, changing diapers, cooking meals, supporting your dreams while hers die. The marriage is already strained. You're obsessed with physics. You work all day, then come home and work more. Mileva is isolated, doesn't speak German well, has no friends in Bern. She's depressed, possibly grieving the child she gave up watching her husband disappear into equations while she manages a household alone. But in 1905, something incredible happens. You're 26 years old, working at a patent office, unknown to the scientific world. And in a single year, you publish 4 papers that change physics forever. The first paper explains the photoelectric effect, proving that light is made of particles called photons. This paper will eventually win you a Nobel Prize. The second paper proves that atoms exist by explaining Brownian motion, the random jiggling of particles in liquid. The third paper introduces special relativity, proving that time and space are not absolute, but relative to the observer's motion. Time can slow down. Distances can shrink. Nothing is fixed. The fourth paper contains the most famous equation in history. E equals mc squared. Energy and mass are the same thing. Matter can be converted to energy. This equation will eventually lead to atomic bombs, but right now it's just an elegant mathematical truth. You write these papers at night, on weekends, during slow moments at the patent office. You're not in a university. You don't have access to laboratories. You don't have colleagues to discuss ideas with. You're alone in your apartment, with a sleeping baby in the next room, a wife who's growing more distant, and a mind that can't stop asking questions. The papers are published in Annalen der Physik, a prestigious journal, and then nothing happens. A few physicists notice. Most ignore them. You're a nobody from a patent office. Why should anyone listen to you? You wait for job offers. They don't come. You wait for recognition. It doesn't arrive. You keep working at the patent office, keep raising your son, keep watching your marriage slowly fall apart. It takes years for the scientific community to understand what you've done. Slowly, physicists start testing your theories. They do experiments. The experiments confirm you're right. Word spreads. By 1908, universities start paying attention. By 1909, you finally get an academic position at the University of Zurich. You're 30 years old. You spent nearly a decade in obscurity after creating the most revolutionary physics of the century. And now, finally, you're a professor. You should be happy. But the damage is done. Your marriage is broken. Mileva is bitter, exhausted, trapped in a life she never wanted. And you're emotionally distant, more connected to your equations than to your family. Over the next few years, you move from job to job, climbing the academic ladder. Zurich, Prague, back to Zurich, then Berlin. Each move is a promotion, more prestige, higher salary. Berlin especially, the centre of German science, the most prestigious position possible. You're becoming famous. Scientists know your name. You're giving lectures, attending conferences, debating with the greatest minds in physics. But your personal life is collapsing. You and Mileva are barely speaking. You have a second son, Edward, in 1910. But even a new baby can't save the marriage. You fight constantly. She resents your fame, your obsession with work, your emotional coldness. You resent her bitterness, her lack of understanding, her demands for attention. In Berlin, you meet your cousin Elsa. She's divorced, older, maternal. She doesn't understand physics, but she understands you. She offers comfort, warmth, simplicity. You start an affair. It's not about passion. It's about escape. Elsa makes life easy. She takes care of you, handles practical matters, doesn't demand intellectual engagement. Mileva finds out. The marriage explodes. You move out. You write Mileva a contract, a cold, brutal list of conditions. If she wants to stay married and keep receiving financial support, she must follow rules. She must serve your meals on time, keep your clothes clean, leave you alone in your study, expect no affection, and not speak to you unless you address her first. Think about that. You're treating your wife like a servant, formalizing emotional abuse in a written contract. She doesn't sign it. Instead, she takes the children and moves back to Zurich. You're separated. Your sons grow up without you. It's 1914 and World War I begins. You're in Berlin, the capital of Germany, surrounded by nationalist fervour. Scientists you respect sign a manifesto supporting Germany's war aims, defending the invasion of Belgium, claiming Germany is fighting a defensive war. You're asked to sign. You refuse. You're one of the few German intellectuals who opposes the war publicly. You sign a counter-manifesto calling for peace. This makes you unpopular. Germany is losing, suffering, starving. Food is rationed. People are dying. And here you are, a prominent scientist, saying the war is wrong. Some call you a traitor, but you can't pretend the war is noble. You see it for what it is, nationalist madness. Young men dying for old men's egos. You become a pacifist, not because it's easy, but because you can't lie to yourself about what war means. During the war, while Germany is collapsing, you're working on your greatest achievement, general relativity. Special relativity explained motion at constant speeds. General relativity explains gravity, acceleration, and the curvature of space-time. You're proving that massive objects like stars and planets bend space and time around them, that gravity isn't a force but a curve in the fabric of reality itself. It takes you nearly 10 years to complete the mathematics. The equations are brutally difficult. You teach yourself new areas of math just to express your ideas. You have false starts, errors, moments where you think you're wrong about everything. In 1915, you finally publish the theory. It's beautiful, elegant, revolutionary, and nobody cares. The world is at war. People are dying. Who has time for abstract physics? But then, in 1919, something extraordinary happens. A British astronomer named Arthur Eddington leads an expedition to observe a solar eclipse. According to your theory, the sun's gravity should bend light from distant stars. During an eclipse, when the sun's light is blocked, astronomers should be able to measure this bending. Eddington does the measurement. Your theory is confirmed. Light bends, space curves. You were right. The news spreads around the world. Newspapers proclaim you a genius. You become an overnight celebrity. You're on the front page of the New York Times. Everyone wants to meet you, interview you, hear you speak. You're 40 years old, and suddenly you're the most famous scientist in the world. People treat you like a magician who unlocks the universe's secrets. They ask you to explain relativity in simple terms. You try, but it's hard. Your theories are mathematical. They require years of study to truly understand. But people want sound bites, simple answers, proof that you're the genius they think you are. Fame is exhausting. You're invited to events you don't want to attend. Journalists follow you. Photographers want pictures. Everyone has opinions about you. Some worship you. Some resent you. Anti-Semites hate you because you're Jewish. Nationalists hate you because you opposed the war. Other scientists are jealous of your fame. You divorce Mileva in 1919. As part of the settlement, you promise her the money from your eventual Nobel Prize. You're confident you'll win. 3 months later, you marry Elsa. Your sons are furious. Hans Albert, now 15, feels betrayed. You barely know Eduard, who's 9. They stay in Zurich with their mother. You see them occasionally awkward visits where you're more like a distant uncle than a father. In 1921, you finally win the Nobel Prize. Not for relativity, which is still controversial, but for your 1905 paper on the photoelectric effect. You don't attend the ceremony. You're travelling, giving lectures, being famous. You send the prize money to Mileva as promised. It's a fortune, enough to support her and the boys, but money doesn't fix what's broken. You start travelling constantly. America, England, France, Japan, Palestine. Everywhere you go, crowds gather. People cheer. You're treated like a rock star. In Japan, thousands greet you at the port. In America, you're paraded through New York. You meet presidents, prime ministers, celebrities. Charlie Chaplin becomes your friend. But this fame isolates you. You're no longer a person. You're a symbol, an icon. People don't want to know the real you. The man who abandoned a daughter, divorced his wife, barely knows his sons. They want Einstein the genius, Einstein the rebel, Einstein the wise sage with wild hair and a quirky personality. You play the role. You cultivate the image, the messy hair, the rumpled clothes, the casual attitude. It's partly authentic, but it's also performance. You're giving people what they expect, and the more you perform, the more disconnected you feel from yourself. In the 1920s, physics is revolutionizing again. Younger scientists like Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg and Erwin Schrödinger are developing quantum mechanics, a theory about the behavior of atoms and particles. It's strange, counterintuitive, and probabilistic. According to quantum mechanics, particles don't have definite positions until you measure them. Reality is fundamentally uncertain. You hate this. You helped start quantum mechanics with your photoelectric effect paper, but this new interpretation disturbs you. You believe in a deterministic universe, where causes lead to effects, where reality exists independently of observation. The idea that the universe is fundamentally random, that God plays dice, offends your sense of order. You spend the rest of your life arguing against quantum mechanics. You devise thought experiments trying to prove it's incomplete. You debate Bohr, Heisenberg, the greatest physicist of the age, and you lose. Not because you're wrong about the math, but because the experiments keep confirming quantum mechanics. The universe really is probabilistic. Reality really is uncertain. This becomes your tragedy. You revolutionized physics twice, but you can't accept the third revolution. You're left behind, clinging to classical ideas while physics moves forward. Younger scientists respect your achievements, but ignore your criticisms. You're becoming irrelevant in your own field. Meanwhile, in Germany, things are getting dangerous. The Weimar Republic is unstable. Hyperinflation destroys the economy. Political extremists, communists and fascists fight in the streets. The Nazi Party is rising. And you, a Jewish pacifist intellectual who opposed the war, are exactly the kind of person they hate. Anti-Semitism is growing. Not just from Nazis, but from mainstream society. Some physicists attack your theories as Jewish physics, claiming relativity is a Jewish conspiracy to corrupt German science with abstract nonsense. They want to return to Aryan physics. Whatever that means, it's insane, racist, and increasingly mainstream. In 1933, Hitler becomes Chancellor. Within months, Jews are being fired from government jobs, including universities. Your position in Berlin is no longer safe. The Nazis put a price on your head. $5,000 for anyone who kills you. Your books are burned in public bonfires. Your property is confiscated. You're in America on a lecture tour when Hitler takes power. You never return to Germany. You can't. You'd be arrested or murdered. At 54 years old, you're a refugee. Everything you built in Germany, gone. Your home, your job, your place in German science, all taken. You settle in Princeton, New Jersey. The Institute for Advanced Study offers you a position. It's prestigious, well-paid, safe. But it's exile. You're an immigrant in a country where you don't fully understand the language or culture. You're torn from the European scientific community. Your colleagues are scattered, some killed, some fled, some collaborating with Nazis. Your family is fractured. Elsa is with you, but she's sick. She dies in 1936 from heart and kidney problems. Your sons are still in Europe. Hans Albert eventually emigrates to America and becomes an engineer. You have a distant, formal relationship. You see each other occasionally, but there's no warmth, no real connection. Edward is worse. He has schizophrenia. He's in and out of psychiatric hospitals in Switzerland. You can't bring him to America. You can't visit him because you can't return to Europe during the war. You support him financially but can't be there. Your younger son lives in institutions, mentally ill, and you're an ocean away, unable to help. Mileva struggles to care for Edward alone. She's bitter, exhausted, aging. She blames you for everything. Edward's illness, Hans Albert's distance, her wasted life. And maybe she's right. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, a better father, things would be different. But you weren't. You were brilliant at physics and terrible at being human. In 1939, everything gets worse. World War II begins. Europe is at war again, 20 years after the last one ended, and you bear some responsibility for what's coming. In August 1939, you sign a letter to President Roosevelt. It's written by a physicist named Leo Szilard, but it carries your name because you're famous enough to get the president's attention. The letter warns that Nazi Germany might be developing atomic weapons using nuclear fission, the process of splitting atoms to release energy, the energy predicted by your equation E = mc squared. The letter urges America to start its own nuclear weapons program before Germany does. You sign it because you're terrified of what Hitler would do with such a weapon. But in signing, you help start the Manhattan Project, the American program that will build the first atomic bombs. You're not involved in the actual work. The government doesn't trust you. You're a pacifist, a former German citizen, and the FBI suspects you might be a communist sympathizer. J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, opens a file on you. For the rest of your life, agents watch you, tap your phones, read your mail, investigate your associates. You're the most famous scientist in America, and your own government treats you like a potential spy. You spend the war years in Princeton, working on physics, trying to develop a unified field theory that combines gravity and electromagnetism. It's your obsession, your white whale. You believe there must be a single theory that explains all forces. You work on it for decades and make no progress. It's a dead end, but you can't let it go. In 1945, the war in Europe ends. Hitler is dead. The Nazis are defeated. You should feel relief. Instead, you feel horror. Because in August, America drops atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 2 cities incinerated. Over 100,000 people killed instantly. Thousands more dying slowly from radiation. The bombs use the physics you helped create. E = mc squared, turned into weapons. You didn't build the bombs. You weren't part of the Manhattan Project. But your theories made them possible. Your equation proved that matter could be converted to energy. Now everyone sees what that means. Entire cities erased in seconds. You're devastated. You make a statement. Woe is me. You spend the rest of your life advocating for nuclear disarmament, for world government, for any system that might prevent nuclear war. You write letters, give speeches, sign petitions. People call you naive, idealistic, a scientist who doesn't understand politics. Maybe they're right. Maybe you are naive. But you've seen what happens when scientists give governments the tools for destruction. You helped create the atomic age, and now you're trying desperately to control it before it destroys everything. The Cold War begins. America and the Soviet Union build more bombs, bigger bombs, hydrogen bombs thousands of times more powerful than Hiroshima. The world lives under the threat of nuclear annihilation, and you, the face of modern physics, carry the weight of knowing your work enabled this. The FBI intensifies its surveillance. McCarthy is hunting communists. You've signed pacifist petitions, supported civil rights, advocated for socialist causes. Hoover's file on you grows to over 1,400 pages. They investigate your friends, your colleagues, anyone you associate with. Some suspect you're a Soviet agent. It's absurd. You're not a communist. You're just an old man who thinks nations should cooperate instead of building weapons to destroy each other. You're increasingly isolated. Elsa is dead. Edward is institutionalized. Hans Albert is distant. Your scientific colleagues have moved on. You're still working on unified field theory, but nobody thinks you'll succeed. Younger, physicists are exploring quantum field theory, particle physics, areas where you're no longer relevant. You become a symbol more than a scientist. People visit Princeton hoping to glimpse you. You walk from home to the institute, usually in the same rumpled sweater. Tourists take photos, children ask for autographs. You're friendly but distant, locked inside a mind that's still trying to solve problems everyone else has abandoned. In the 1950s, your health declines. You have an abdominal aortic aneurysm, a bulge in the main artery from your heart. It's like a time bomb. It could rupture at any moment, and when it does, you'll bleed to death internally. Doctors suggest surgery, but you refuse. You're 73 years old. You've lived a long life. Why extend it with invasive procedures? You keep working. Even though you're dying, even though your theories aren't panning out, you work on equations every day. It's what you've always done. Physics is your refuge, your purpose, the one constant in a life of chaos. In April 1955, the aneurysm ruptures. You're admitted to Princeton Hospital. Doctors say they can try surgery to repair it. You refuse again. You ask for paper and pencil instead. Even in your hospital bed, dying, you work on equations. You're trying to solve the puzzle one last time. You die on April 18th, 1955. You're 76 years old. Your last words are in German, spoken to a nurse who doesn't understand the language. Nobody knows what you said. Your final thoughts disappear with you. You requested a simple funeral. No publicity. No monument. Your body is cremated. Your ashes are scattered in a river. No grave marker. No shrine. You wanted to disappear as completely as possible, but your brain doesn't disappear. The pathologist who performs your autopsy steals it without permission. He takes it home, cuts it into pieces, preserves it in jars. For decades, your brain is studied, measured, analysed, seeking the physical source of genius. It's a violation, a desecration. Even in death, you're not allowed peace. Your legacy is complicated. You changed physics forever. Relativity is fundamental to modern science. GPS satellites use your equations. Scientists studying black holes, the expansion of the universe, and the Big Bang all build on your work. You're still considered one of the greatest minds in history. But your personal life was a disaster. You abandoned a daughter. You divorced a wife you drove to bitterness. You had 2 sons, one who barely knew you, and one who lived in mental institutions. You spent your final decades opposing the dominant theory in your field while clinging to ideas that led nowhere, and your work enabled the creation of weapons capable of destroying civilization. So why did being Einstein suck? Not because you weren't brilliant. You were. Not because you weren't recognized. You were famous, celebrated, honoured. It sucked because brilliance sucked. Came at a terrible cost. Your mind worked differently from everyone else's, and that made childhood torture. Teachers thought you were stupid. Other children thought you were weird. Your family worried you were broken. You learned early that being different meant being alone. When you finally found your place in physics, you couldn't get a job. Your genius wasn't recognised for years. You watched mediocre scientists get positions while you worked in a patent office. You raised a family in poverty and obscurity while creating revolutionary theories in your spare time. When fame finally came, it was a cage. People wanted Einstein the icon, not Einstein the person. You became a symbol, performed a role, and lost yourself in the process. You couldn't walk down a street without being recognised. You couldn't have a private life. Everything you did was news. Your relationships failed because physics always came first. You chose equations over your wife, theories over your children. You weren't a monster, just a man so obsessed with understanding the universe that you neglected the humans who needed you. And by the time you realised the cost, it was too late. The physics community left you behind. You revolutionised science twice, but when quantum mechanics became dominant, you couldn't accept it. You spent decades arguing against theories that turned out to be correct. You worked on problems nobody else cared about. The young genius became the old man shouting at progress. You lived through 2 world wars. You watched your homeland embrace fascism. You became a refugee, stateless. exiled from the country where you built your career. You watched friends and colleagues killed or scattered. You helped start the atomic age and then watched in horror as your work created weapons of mass destruction. You spent your final decades under surveillance by the government you'd fled to for safety. The FBI suspected you were a traitor. Your mail was read. Your phones were tapped. You were the most famous scientist alive, and you were treated like a criminal. Your children suffered. Edward had schizophrenia and spent his life in institutions. You couldn't help him. Hans Albert grew up without you and built a life where you were a distant figure. They both had to live as Einstein's sons, carrying that name, that legacy, that weight. How do you build your own identity when your father changed the understanding of space and time? And in the end, you were alone. No Elsa. No close friends nearby. Just you and your equations, working until the very last moments, trying to solve one more problem, understand one more mystery. You died without finishing your unified field theory. The puzzle remained unsolved. People remember you as a genius, the wild-haired professor who unlocked the universe. They put your face on posters with quotes about imagination and curiosity. They make you a symbol of intelligence, of science, of thinking differently. But they forget the cost, the loneliness of being different, the years of obscurity and rejection, the failed marriages and distant children, the guilt of enabling weapons that could end civilization, the frustration of spending your final decades on problems that went nowhere, the surveillance, the exile, the isolation. You changed how humanity understands reality. You proved that time is relative, space can curve, mass and energy are interchangeable. You showed us that the universe is stranger and more beautiful than anyone imagined. But it came at a price, and if people knew what you really went through, if they understood the loneliness, the failure, the guilt, they might think twice before calling anyone the next Einstein. Being Einstein meant being brilliant, but it also meant being broken, isolated and haunted by the consequences of your own genius. And that's why, despite all the fame and achievement, being Einstein really sucked. Your mind gave you the keys to the universe, but locked you away from human connection. Your work earned you immortality, but cost you peace. You understood space and time, but couldn't find your place in either. You changed everything and everyone, but in the end, you couldn't change the parts of yourself that mattered most. That's the truth behind the myth. The genius who unlocked the secrets of the cosmos, but couldn't unlock the secrets of how to be happy, how to be present, how to be a father, a husband, a friend. You could bend space-time, but you couldn't bend toward the people who needed you. So when you think about Einstein, don't just think about relativity or E equals mc squared. Think about the 5-year-old who couldn't speak, terrified he was broken. Think about the teenager abandoned by his family. Think about the patent clerk working in obscurity. Think about the father who never met his firstborn daughter. Think about the refugee fleeing fascism. Think about the pacifist whose equations built bombs. Think about the old man dying alone, still scribbling equations, still searching for answers that wouldn't come. That's Einstein. That's the reality. Brilliant and broken, revolutionary and regretful, famous and fundamentally alone. The man who understood the universe better than almost anyone in history, but never quite figured out how to live in it. And maybe that's the most human thing about you. For all your genius, you struggled with the same things everyone does. Love, family, belonging, meaning, guilt, regret. You just happened to struggle with them while simultaneously revolutionizing physics and becoming the most recognizable scientist in history. That's why being Einstein sucked. Not despite your genius, but because of it. Your mind was a gift that came wrapped in isolation, and you spent your entire life trying to reconcile the two, never quite succeeding, never giving up, always working, always thinking, always alone with your equations, until the very end, when the aneurysm ruptured and you were dying in that hospital bed. You didn't call for your family. You asked for paper and pencil. Because even then, even at the absolute end, the equations mattered more than anything. The search for understanding mattered more than comfort. Maybe that's tragedy. Maybe that's dedication. Maybe it's both. But it's definitely Einstein, the man who chose the universe over everything else and paid the price for that choice every single day of his life. And now you know. Now you've walked in his shoes. Now you understand what it really meant to be Albert Einstein. Not the myth, not the icon, but the man. The brilliant, lonely, complicated, haunted man who changed everything and lost so much in the process. That's the real story. That's the truth. And that's why, despite everything, being Einstein really truly sucked.